Today's Medical Center Hour, Constructing for Health, is another in our History of the Health Sciences lecture series, which we co-produce with historical collections in the Health Sciences Library. The program is also sponsored by the Eleanor Crowder Bjoring Center for Nursing History and by the School of Architecture's Center for Design and Health. Constructing for Health, Lessons from the Vienna Project, while anchored in the rich history of the Enlightenment, also turns us distinctly forward to engage questions and concerns at the intersection of health and design, questions that matter urgently to us in the 21st century. During the Enlightenment from 1765 on, the Habsburg Empire, capital of Vienna, Austria, underwent massive transformations in urban design and appearance, from the introduction of sewer systems and illuminated streets to construction of new public facilities, including parks. All these changes were guided by principles we now consider fundamental to public health and to creating healthy, green, livable cities. Habsburg Emperor Joseph II, who ruled between 1780 and 1790, was a reformer with almost utopian and quite Jeffersonian ideas about architecture, public health, and civic well-being. He made further improvements by constructing Vienna's medical district, including a vast general hospital, a military hospital, an institute for the mentally ill, and the architecturally splendid Josephinum Medical, Surgical, and Military Academy. To explain the Vienna Project and its enduring relevance, we welcome from Vienna architect and cultural preservation specialist Markus Swittalek. Dr. Swittalek is managing director of Moment Home, an architectural firm in Vienna, and he's also a lecturer at the Medical University of Vienna. We also welcome from across grounds, but originally from Austria also, architect and lecturer Esther Lorenz, who will offer a brief response. So yesterday, today, tomorrow, what does it mean to construct for health? Whether we're talking about cities and landscapes, public and private spaces, or healthcare facilities. What, even looking ahead, should count as health? Even as we consider the Vienna Project as an important design and health precedent, might we consider too how we, as 21st century health professionals and design professionals, might together undertake more deliberate, richly imaginative, and boldly collaborative design and build efforts to construct for health. Again, I'd like to thank the History of the Health Sciences lecture series, the Center for Design and Health, the School of Architecture, the Eleanor Crowder Bjoring Center for Nursing Historical Inquiry in the School of Nursing, the Department of Public Health Sciences, and the Center for Biomedical Ethics and Humanities in the School of Medicine. These groups also formed a partnership to host a smaller interprofessional symposium this afternoon, Constructing for Health, a Global Nod to Nightingale, which has been funded by the Buckner W. Clay Endowment for the Humanities from the College and Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. So you can see there's a whole lot of UVA that's come together for this conversation this afternoon, and we're delighted to start with our visitor, Markus Swittalek.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the warm welcome at the great University of Virginia, at the School of Nursing here in Jefferson Country. First and foremost, I would like to thank Professor Arlene Keeley, who made it possible that I'm with you here at the Medical Center Hour, here in front of you, in front of this distinguished audience. All men are created equal. Likely the most important, or one of the most important sentences in the Western world. Florence Nightingale might have considered these 5 words in her efforts as well. Emperor Joseph II certainly did. He can be remembered for basically 3 major measures. for the ban of torture and capital punishment, for signing the Toleranzpatent, which provides a religious freedom, and for setting up schools, and in particular for founding the Medical Surgery Academy Josephinum in Vienna. This was considered to foster human health, healing, and well-being. The Declaration of Independence, the French Revolution, and the reign of Emperor Joseph II of the Holy Roman Empire and the ruler of the Habsburg Empire were turning points in history. Joseph II shaped the Aufklärung, and there are amazing parallels to find in what has happened during these years here in the United States and there in Austria. On a personal level, there are amazing parallels between two politicians and amateur architects, Thomas Jefferson and Joseph II. Today I would like to offer some insight in the interface between politics and urban planning, landscape architecture, and architecture in order to improve health, healing, and well-being. You have to understand, during the period of the Enlightenment, constructing for health was a core focus of the Emperor Joseph II. Architecture and urban design maneuver within a framework that is defined by politics, cultural, economical, and social conditions, and can have a major impact in people's lives, risks, and health. Joseph II realized the importance of improving health health and life conditions in order to strengthen his nation. He took personal interest and wanted to learn about the circumstances people were living in firsthand. He did not hesitate to visit hospitals, and it took his staff a hardship to avoid exposing the emperor to certain diseases. He relied on a small number of profound and very engaged advisors. So this is something, his politics is something he cannot be accomplished by a single person. So it always have to have a certain ground that basically fuels certain ideas and promotes ideas to put them into politics. And this is basically pretty much what he has done. One of his very close advisors was his personal surgeon, which is Johann Alexander von Brambilla, or Giovanni Alessandro de Brambilla, since he was born in Lombardy, which was at that time part of the Holy Roman Empire. He was the leading surgeon and chief of the military administration and of the armed forces in the rank of a general. He was responsible for many activities in the improvement of health conditions and risk management for the military and for the civil society. After the sudden death of Emperor Francis I, who was the father of Joseph II in 1765, Joseph became Roman Emperor in co-reign of his mother, Maria Theresia. From there on, a massive process of change began in Vienna's building stock and appearance. One of his first engagements in urban planning and architecture became the Imperial Library, which he completed by setting up a square in the style of Classicism, not Baroque anymore as it was a generation before. Now this square is known as Josefsplatz, Joseph Square. He opened, and the structure behind the palace, well, that's the Imperial Library. And what he did is he opened the library to the public. So this, because he understood that education is a precondition for self-governance of the people. Space and options for expansion within the city of Vienna were very limited. You've got the medieval structure, as you can see here, yeah, and then you have kind of suburban setting, and in between you have got this. It's called the glacis. So this was basically for defense purposes, and it had to be an open land, kind of a vast land, which was not settled at that point. What he basically did, he turned this into a park, yeah, and again opened it to the public, as he did with a number of other former imperial parks. So one of his so there was the imperial park, and he did some further additions. So there were kind of developments in housing. So this was kind of distant. The suburbs urbanized, a number of new housing developments took place. Public facilities, hospitals, and barracks were built next to newly developed residential areas, as seen before. Key areas of urban developments were defined. Urban design followed the principles for a healthy, green, and livable city. Infrastructural facilities were created to improve health, healing, fight and sorts of diseases, and not to forget about child mortality. A newly set up sewage system was linked to properly paved streets, and to reduce the spread of epidemics, they were basically wetted. Dirt roads had to be sprinkled to reduce containment dust. A large number of laws and regulations and to enforce these newly sanitary guidelines were enacted. The emperor realized the importance of parks within urban boundaries in order to provide recreational zones for the people, another aspect of improving health conditions, healing, and well-being for all men. He opened the imperial hunting grounds, the Prater, and the Augarten, an imperial park, to the residents of Vienna. He wanted to be remembered not as the emperor of his people, but of the admirer of his people. So that basically tells this bachelor up here, dedicated to all men for recreation by their admirer, who was the emperor. The Prater Hauptallee, which is part of the Prater, is a 3-mile long alley, and you can see this right in here. Well, the emperor, he really enjoyed riding his little green-colored carriage, cabriolet. Here, sitting with Brambilla, and they were just chatting a little bit around and getting on new ideas what to do. This was a 3-mile alley crossing the Prater and formed the backbone of a new structure, a grid of axes that was laid over the existing city to organize and restructure it. Joseph did travel a lot. Well, basically a third of his reign he was on travel. And he did it within his country and outside, to Italy, France, and Russia. From Villa, he was always on his side. France was playing a key role in that. It was the leading nation of the time, and the Queen of France was Joseph's sister, Antoinette. In 1777, in the midst of the Revolutionary War, and the year before the United States and France signed an alliance, Benjamin Franklin was commissioner in France pretty much at that time. Joseph II and Brambilla were visiting France, and their interest was to learn about the military, the infrastructure, the industry, and, first and foremost, the hospitals. You have to understand, Joseph, he arrived in Paris. The next morning, he was getting out to Versailles Palace to visit his sister, having tea with her.
went back to Paris. Next morning, what did he do? He went straight into the hospital, into the Hotel Dieu, which was considered to be the largest hospital on the continent, for up to 3,000 patients. Well, they were not in a good shape. The conditions in the hospital were kind of staring, and he grabbed an idea. And they also were visiting the newly opened Académie Royale de Chirurgie, meaning an academy to train and educate surgeons. The interesting part is, the anatomical theater, it's some sort of obvious. And here you see a chapel. So science and religion, they were tied up pretty much. And an academy, a university, used to have a chapel as an integrated part. Back in Vienna, plans for a similar institution like the Hotel Dieu were made. An academy to educate and train physicians and surgeons for military and civil needs. Theory and practice were attached to each other. The hospital, obviously, and the academy should be combined with, and the hospital basically was split into a civil section, the Allgemeine Krankenhaus, general hospital for up to 2,000 patients, and the military hospital for another 1,200 patients. You can count them up, matching up 3,200. Well, got it. The idea was to set up a new network of medical facilities in the Habsburg Empire to improve, again, health and healing for the civil and the military society and provide well-being for all men, for everyone, or more general, to set up institutions to foster the unalienable right that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the center of these measures was the setup of the medical district in Vienna, ranging from the Medical Surgical Academy Josephinum as an education institution to various hospitals as mentioned. These districts, as I mentioned before, consisted of the general hospital, which you can see in the front. See, right here, that's the military hospital. Here in the rear, that's the Josephinum. And there's something in between, the Narrenturm. The complex was added with a dorm for 200 students and with a medicinal herb garden. Don't forget about that. So the idea was, which was accomplished, to set up the largest hospital complex in Europe. The Vienna Medical District has an angle, the Narrenturm. Here again. So before you could see the general hospital, and this is the military hospital. So sources and money was limited, as it is today. And the options for the Habsburg Empire, well, they were some sort of tight. So the emperor turned existing structures into the general hospital, so basically remodeled them. And the only new design was done was the military hospital, the academy, obviously, and the Narrenturm. That's the Narrenturm. So what is it about these prestigious building? Well, it's not in a good shape, as you can see. You have to know, it's basically the angle between the civil and the military hospital. And it's a unique structure, and it's influenced by the revolutionary classicism. So Joseph has learned about this idea in France a few years earlier on. Now we know that the emperor himself did drawings on the design of the building. There are many speculations about numerical and technical details of this structure.
This Narrenturm accommodated mentally ill. This, another 250. This was a very early effort to treat physical, psychical defects. It is said that the emperor himself came almost every week, walked up the stairs to a little octagon on top, with perfect view overlooking the city of Vienna and its newly developed suburbs. And I have to add something. This is the first known and still existing structure which has lightning rods. And they are invented, well, either by the Czech priest, or basically parallel to it by Benjamin Franklin. You can guess. So the emperor, when Emperor Charles VI, who was the grandfather of Joseph, well, he built a monastery and residence in Klosterneuburg, which is near Vienna, and it's comparable to El Escorial near Madrid, so Spain. Maria Theresa built Schönbrunn Palace, which is comparable to the Palace of Versailles, France. And Emperor Joseph II, well, he built some sort of imperial princely palace, the Josephinum. The structure looks like a princely palace, but instead it is a facility for education. They all wanted to manifest the Iranian architecture, to be remembered, create a monument, for themselves. And here again, just take a close look to the floor plan of the Josephinum. This is a kind of a master plan. When Joseph was a teenager, that's what we know. He took a look onto these footprints, and this was a master plan for a princely palace in general. It was not built exactly like it was, but structure-wise. So, and the main parts are basically, so you've got the courtyard, you have got the formal staircase, you've got the ballroom, and you've got the apartment of the prince and the apartment of the princess, and additional staircases, and here again a chapel. Just take a look. There's some colors, columns standing in between, and here there's an each for the altar. That's the Josephinum. Again, you've got the courtyard, you've got the formal staircase. This was considered to be the anatomical theater. Well, yesterday I've seen a similar structure here, which was cut off, and now there are office spaces in there. Well, it's pretty much the same. So you've got an office and some other space. So the whole backbone is broken. So now you cannot walk anymore from the anatomical theater into the apartments, which, since it's an educational institution, well, these are basically home of the collections. On the male side, there were the instruments, and on the female side, wax models. You will learn about them later on. Again, you've got extra staircases, and you remember that's the spot of the chapel. There is no chapel in here. It's a reading room. It's a library, and there's a niche, not for an altar, but for the bust of the emperor. And when I was walking the lawn on the grounds of the University of Virginia, seeing the rotunda, well, the rotunda, as I've learned, is the main structure of the ground, and it's a library. So again, the most important spot is the library, and the church on the ground was built a generation later on. This is the inauguration ceremony of the Josephinum. And here you can see Brambilla and a lot of other guys sitting around. Well, some of them are known. And Brambilla, who was turned into the director, elected
as director of the academy, he emphasized surgery, and again, in order to improve healing. This is how the reading room did look quite a while ago. And it provides two different options in a way. So you see the bookcases, they look rather similar to the windows. So there are two options. Either you take a look into science, or you take a look out into the world. And standing in a rotunda, you can do something rather similar. Again, you can look into science, or even when you look out of the window. So basically, you can see either the pavilions on the ground, or you just look straight along the lawn into the landscape, into the world. So this is Emperor Joseph II, and you see how remarkable his portrait as an imperator. Well, indeed, he was an imperator because he just followed in line the tradition of the antique Roman Empire. And there was an occasion, well, at least that's what it's told, that the emperor did visit the studio of the artist, Giuseppe Carracci. And, the artist didn't feel that well because, there was something going on with the portrait because he basically took a misadventure by portraying or imaging the emperor with a serious face, side of the face, and a cheerful one. And, he started to explain to the emperor, I will take care of it, and I will put this away. And the emperor said, stop. No. That's how human beings are. We have a cheerful and a serious side. So let it as it is. Well, and that's how it is today. I told you about the wax models. As you can see, they are certainly not for student and learning purposes only. They are done very delicately, and they are basically posing. And the poses they were taking from Renaissance sculptures, and they are bedded on purple cushions and mattresses, and it's done all very nicely. So what basically ended up is that the Josephinum became a hotspot for and was considered to be a top site. So this is basically blending science, we can say science merges with the arts. And when the heir to the throne of Russia visited Vienna, he certainly visited the Josephinum. So the century before, it was a so-called Wunderkammer, where a kind of treasure hold of all sorts of delicate artful pieces. And a generation later, it was a surgical academy. So once the Josephinum was considered to be a top site in Vienna, today the medical district was extended considerably and is unique in its complexity. The Josephinum was established for research, teaching, and the arts. It is registered as a national monument. There is no doubt that the Josephinum is a very special monument for cultural heritage. It is not only an architectural manifestation of classicism in Austria, it is also a declaration for the Enlightenment politics of Joseph II and for the medical sciences
in behalf of improving, healing, and well-being for everyone. All men are created equal. Thank you.
Thank you, Markus, for this insightful talk and this delightful excursion to Vienna. The regime of Emperor Joseph II forms an excellent example for the correlation between hygiene and health and the built environment, both forming the core of the emperor's political actions in pursuit of an enlightened, competitive and stable empire. From the mid-18th century onwards, European cities experienced a massive growth. Alongside other European countries, the multi-ethnic states of the Habsburgs faced a significant pressure for modernization in terms of socio-economic, technical and cultural aspects. As Markus mentioned, the Habsburg Empire faced the problem of an enormous mortality, in particular amongst the lower classes and children, due to lacking medical prevention and inadequate treatment methods. The improvements in general hygiene and medical care had a significant impact on the population growth in Vienna. The emperor, as an enlightened regent, believed in reason, knowledge, and the equality of man as the basis for his actions. But he certainly understood as well the importance of the survival of his population as a fundamental socio-economic factor, and the health of his workforce as the basis for keeping up with the economic developments in Europe at that time. A healthy urban environment and access to healthcare were crucial in achieving this goal. The renovation and management of the Glacis, as Markus pointed out, and the opening of the Prater provided new recreation areas for the population, and at the same time established a greater social balance by making these green areas accessible to all and safe to use. About a century later, rural depopulation during the industrialization process exerted again increased pressure on European cities during the 19th century in terms of population density and resulting health problems. The urban projects in Paris, carried out by Georges-Eugène Haussmann, and especially in Barcelona, planned by Ildefons Sperda, are the most radical examples of urban expansion and modernization grounded in the need for sunlight, natural lighting and ventilation in homes, waste disposal and sewer systems, as well as the need for seamless movement of people, goods, energy and information. These developments can be understood against the background of the miasma theory of infection, the belief that illnesses were caused by inhalation of gases rising from sewers and garbage, that in the second half of the 19th century was replaced by germ theory, but that nevertheless led to major innovations in public health policies and practices. So in what ways are these historical occurrences becoming relevant today? Well, we are still pressured to keep up with scientific understanding of the spread of diseases and the development of measures of prevention and treatment, both environmental and medical, in face of new diseases and the ever-increasing complexity of urban living, enabled by new construction and transportation technologies. Well, in the 19th century, cities and hospitals had to fight typhus, tuberculosis, and cholera. We are confronted with new illnesses today. In 2003, Hong Kong was shaken by an instant SARS outbreak that began in a hospital and shortly later broke out in Amoy Gardens. a high-density, middle-class private housing estate that is home to approximately 15,000 people. The rapid spread that affected more than 200 residents within only a few days led to the quarantine of an entire block, Block E, in which the first 107 cases were registered, and most of whom lived in flats that were vertically arranged and actually connected by a downpipe. It was found that the virus, in addition to droplet infection, was primarily spread through the air. In Amoy Gardens, a high concentration of viral aerosols in the building's plumbing system were drawn into the bathroom through floor drains and fans and later transported by prevailing winds to adjacent blocks at Amoy Gardens where further infections occurred. These discoveries had significant implications for control and prevention, from the scale of the building and the apartment to the city to the global networks of cities that are connected through air travel. Besides improved plumbing and disinfection measures, the SARS outbreak in Hong Kong led to citywide public instructions on disease-preventing behavior, such as frequent washing of hands, wearing of face masks, as well as safe practices of coughing, sneezing, and nose blowing. Markus told me yesterday that Emperor Joseph II had instrumentalized the parishes in the new suburbs to inform the general population about his newly introduced healthcare facilities that were accessible to them, and instructed the priests to include this information in their sermons. In Hong Kong, the education of the public happened in particular through the public transport system, through visual materials, but also through voice announcements, offering detailed instructions on, for example, how to use a handkerchief. Airports needed to be equipped with adequate surveillance devices that allowed to measure the temperature of each entering traveler and for subsequent quarantine of potential patients. While constantly improving and optimizing our living conditions, our contemporary urban and suburban ways of living have also fostered the rise of lifestyle diseases that increasingly pose health and socioeconomic problems in the developed world. Instead of solely preventing disease, cities are now urged to actively promote health. The active design guidelines issued by the City of New York, for example, are aimed at reversing some of the trends in the 20th century that have given rise to monofunctional and car-oriented environments. The guidelines were developed by the New York City Departments of Design and Construction, Health and Mental Hygiene, Transportation, City Planning, Office of Management and Budget, together with planners and architects. A combination of experts that displays the issues at stake that are closely interrelated and the required collaborative and interdisciplinary work on solutions that is ahead. The question is to which degree a building or a city can promote physical activity, facing the difficult task of making it accessible to all while challenging and training its citizens according to their respective disposition. Public education is carried out through governments, but as we all know from our experience here at UVA, from whose wealth programs and new incentives by Aetna, increasingly through health systems and health insurance companies as well. Urbanization posed an enormous public health challenge on the governments of the 18th and 19th century. While the growth rates in Europe and the US have slowed down dramatically since, from a global perspective, the urbanization process is still ongoing. According to the UN Population Division, 70% of the world's population is expected to be living in cities by 2050. This means that global health will be increasingly determined in cities, presenting a challenge for politics, healthcare, and design to create living environments that foster simultaneously physical, mental, social, and economic health. Thank you.
Thank you both, Markus and Esther. And we have a generous amount of time for some conversation with the speakers and also among ourselves. We have a nice, diverse gathering of persons from medicine, nursing, architecture, and also the public community. And we have a couple of microphones that we can bring to you so you can offer your comments and questions. I think there's been a lot brought up that is here for us to think about and consider, not least some correspondences between Vienna and Charlottesville, between Joseph and Thomas Jefferson, that some of us had never thought about before. And if you also want to hear an interesting little quick essay, you can ask Markus about octagonal rooms. But who has a comment or question to start out? And when you ask your question, please tell us who you are.
My name is Eric. Is this working?
Yep, it is.
My name is Eric Middleforth.
Hold it a little closer.
I'm retired from the history department, and I was very curious. I'd be very curious to hear comments from either of you, actually, on whether the structures built by Joseph II actually achieved any of their purposes. We all know that when he died, there was an immediate conservative reaction against Joseph II, so that some of his reforming idealistic, or as you said, utopian measures were turned back, but obviously his buildings remained. So my question is not only whether the program he proposed was turned back, or whether in this case it actually survived and flourished, but whether the buildings that he built actually achieved any of the purposes. This was long before infectious disease was well understood, and the question arises whether building buildings when you don't know much about the diseases could actually achieve any of the purposes that Joseph II famously announced.
All right. Otherwise, I go.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, I would say obviously yes. When you take a closer look, for instance, into the hospitals, what they were considering is, and the military hospital I have on display, yeah. So you had those huge halls for the patients, and then you have the passageways and the halls for the patients. Well, for instance, they had windows from two sides, yeah, and they did care a lot for ventilation. And they did a kind of copper fans setting up there, yeah? So a high ceiling, like in Monticello, and ventilation, and they were making certain halls for certain periods of times. So there was awareness of how diseases, well, although they couldn't explain everything in detail, I'm not on science-based, but certainly experience-based, they did know quite a lot about spreading diseases. So whenever they set up a hospital, they, during this period of time, they were considering it. I hope this answers the question.
My name is Michael Swamberg. I'm from the School of Nursing. And I'll take the bait about the octagonal rooms. But also, I'm interested in the neuron term, the circular building there at the hospital. I know that Jeremy Benton is usually credited with the panopticon, and I know that that was later used in prison design, but it seemed like Joseph II predates by a couple of decades the panopticon. Is there some way you can wield all of those things together?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
you.
First and foremost, believe it or not, before the setup of the internet, there was quite an intense transfer of information, of knowledge, of competence. And students from the Josephinum, they were sent to Great Britain, for instance.
And there are, and England during this period of time was rather important. Well, whether it's the Freemasons, who basically started out in England before they spread over Europe. And they considered surgery a key science. And regarding well, it's you can go with the numbers, and sometimes you have to consider that there is a kind of general mind. And was it the brothers Wright who started out with aviation, or was it the ones back in France? Well, in a certain period of time, there are parallel research, parallel ideas going on. And in this case, I would put it on under these preconditions.
Hello, I'm Julia Monteith. I'm the campus planner for UVA, Office of the Architect. And I also was curious, I'll follow up on the last, we'll just keep following up on each other's questions. On Rantram, any insight into why that form of a building for mental health patients?
There are a number of arguments. One is that the circular shape from an urban design perspective was rather helpful. Basically, angling and connecting the two wings. Yeah, so it's kind of turning point. And obviously, Joseph, he was inspired by, as I've mentioned before, by the revolutionary classicism, and with kind of primary shapes, yeah, like the circle, like, well, the octagon, and others. And there is a practical reason. Well, up and on the inmates, patients, I would like to call them, well, they were crying out loud up and on, depending on what they're considered to be. And so in orientating it basically to the outside, opening to the outside. Yeah, you cannot interfere, or not that much interfere with other noises and sounds and so on. Yeah? And it's also and there's a lot of research going on about the Nagenturm, the Emperor's Kugelhupf, which kind of goes of kind of pop candy or something like this. So it's the rounded shape is kind of cute as well, and you can also interpret it in some regards as a mathematical machinery. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there are certain references. The floor how many floors? Five floors, and the number of rooms on each floor and things like this. So better research has to be done.
This also might, raise some questions too about when we think about designing healthcare facilities now. Do we think of designing for the particular diagnoses or illness experiences that will be housed there, or do we think about designing for the work of the professionals who are going to be delivering care there, or for a number of other reasons? Not that I have any answers. Other questions, comments? Do you want to tell us about some octagons?
Well, sure. Well, again, it's the emperor. The emperor refers to the Roman Empire, to Augustus, Octavian. Well, August, Octagon, Octavian. Well, it's always the 8th. And the German ground consists of 8 single pieces. The the dome in Aachen, Germany, where Charles the Great was residing. It's an octagon. So it was kind of obvious that when you tie your name or position to a certain number, well, 8 would be the right choice. And that's what Joseph did. So, well, I was very excited when I had the opportunity to visit Monticello on this Monday to learn a little more about the octagon up in Monticello. Well, this was part of when Jefferson remodeled Monticello after he was in Paris. While some years before, Joseph did pretty much the same thing with his Joseph structure. Yeah, it was again a private retreat, and it's so amazing the parallels. Neither one was a great admirer of staircases. Yeah, you have those tiny little things to get up to the second floor. Well, same thing at the Joseph structure. Yeah, and again, both mansions, both retreats, they both have on the second floor the octagon, which is considered to be more kind of a private space. Yeah, I do not expect Jefferson or Joseph that he was bringing up too many people up there. Anyway, and when you take a look onto the map of Vienna of these days and of our days, so there are on certain intersections, yeah, and on spots that were important for Joseph, he went with the octagon. And the generation before, well, land surveyor. I learned that Jefferson's father, he was a surveyor. Well, Joseph, he was very much in land surveying. And he kept secret certain maps underneath his mattress. So there were only 2 samples of it, or 2 sets of them. One underneath Joseph's bed, and the other one underneath the mattress of the leading general. Yeah, and when finally Napoleon arrived in Vienna, he was very interested in finding these maps underneath someone's mattress, because Joseph was passed away at that point already. And even when you take a look onto the map of Vienna in our days, certain streets, and so you can basically line them up, and on those cross sections you end up. Well, and you could see the Prater, the little carriage in front. In the rear, it was the Lusthaus, kind of restaurant. Again, an octagon. You can basically map the city with connecting these octagons. And there was a practical aspect as well, because the generation before, it was usually surveying was usually done by getting to the church towers. Well, that's what your enemy can do as well. Yeah. So and in case of warfare, of a conflict, you don't want to get rid of your churches. So and the octagon can be, you have to know where it is, and then you can measure. But up and on, it's not obvious. That's basically has another reason, meaning for doing a land surveying.
I have a question that's also related to geometry. I'm interested in the typology of wards in hospital design. The Josephinum that you showed is a derivative of the royal apartments, which seem to be widely used in many royal palaces across Europe, and it's not really inventing a new type of hospital design. It was really retrofitting the hospital function into an existing building type. I'm wondering, and we know that wards appeared, in later 19th century. What was the critical moment when that new typology emerged for the design of hospital that's moved away from the model of the royal palaces?
All right, excellent question. Well, if you don't mind, I would like to differentiate between the academy and the hospital itself. Mm-hmm. So for the hospital complex, to be precise, not for the military hospital, but for a civil hospital, there was a competition going on. before they decided with which design they want to go with. So, and there were like 10 different designs, 10 different proposals, and they were very different meaning. Some ended up and concluded, well, you better dislocate the whole hospital complex. Get out of an urban environment, put it on a hilltop, and go with a pavilion system. So not with this kind of court thing, yeah, adding one court, one wing attached to the other. So sanitary measures, hygiene, and you have to know, going back to your question, at the Josephinum, the curriculum was totally different to what was at the University of Vienna, the medical faculty. The university, and in particular the medical school, was driven by the Jesuits, by kind of Roman Catholic, well, but they have a very certain position within the Roman Catholic Church, the Jesuits, as you know. So they didn't permit them, were not really willing to change the curriculum. The Josephinum was very, very forward-oriented. So when the medical university in Vienna, 10 years ago from now, well, it was turned into a university after 650 years, and it said, well, they want to split with the alma mater, with the existing, well, and turn it into the faculty, into a university itself. They set up a completely new curriculum. Before, it was more like in the old days. Basically, you're fracturing down the human body and say, go with this, go with that, go with that. And the new curriculum basically is very, let's call it this way, it's very similar to the curriculum of the Josephinum from 225 years ago. So, meaning having an understanding of the human body as a whole, physics and psychological aspects that they basically interact with each other. And they were teaching hygiene, they were teaching statistics, very important in our days, how which measures end up with which consequences and so on. So it was a very enlightened, very modern concept. And so it was breaking a lot with kind of royal aristocracy and things like this. You know? It was more, future-oriented.
You're bringing up both questions of design and curriculum design are interesting. It also tells us sometimes not a lot has changed. Mm-hmm.